Good morning and welcome to Wake Up with the Consciousness Cafe, part of SoulCall Global. My name is Lisa Ferraro. I am the founder and spiritual director of SoulCall Global, and I am so excited this morning. This is one of my favorite subjects in the world as we welcome Chrysti M. Smith. Some of you may know her as Chrysti, the Wordsmith. Good morning, Chrysti, and welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. You're welcome.
Ever since I was a little kid, I used to be the one that would steal away with my parents' Reader's Digest and read the section of it pays to enrich your word power. Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
Tell us about your entree into this passion for words and how it's opened you to a new world.
Well, I've always had a passion for words, just like when you described you turning to the Reader's Digest, it pays to increase your word power as a child. I was the same way. I was extremely curious about words. I would oftentimes sit down. We had a family dictionary, the Merriam-Webster's collegiate dictionary that we kept in our library, and I would often just turn the pages and read words just for the fun of it.
Yeah.
And I remember asking my mother one time where the word Montana came from, because that's where I live, where I grew up. And she didn't know. She couldn't answer that question. And so I thought, well, maybe that's just too hard of a question for anybody to answer. Maybe nobody knows. And I didn't know enough to go and research it myself. But I always remember that incident and have just carried this love of words and etymology with me throughout my life. And when I was in my early 20s, I started to actually collect dictionaries. I would go to pawn shops and used bookstores and buy dictionaries for $1 or $2 and read them. And I gradually, as I was a young person, I didn't go to college right away after high school. So I was kind of an autodidact. I learned a lot by myself.
Yeah.
I began to realize that every single word in our vocabulary has a history, just like every person has a history. And so I started to collect more dictionaries to sort of chase these histories down. And I collected word books too. There are other authors out there doing word studies at the time in the early to mid 80s. And I just gradually kind of filled my cup with informal word study. When I was 30 years old, I decided it was time for myself to enroll myself in college. And I enrolled as an anthropologist / archaeologist,
Nice.
which seems a little counterintuitive considering my passion for words, but really it did feed me very, very well.
Yeah, that makes
Part
sense.
of anthropology is studying linguistics. And when we got to the linguistic part of my anthropological studies, that's when the whole world opened up for me to learn about languages and language itself, how we as human beings are unique in all the animal kingdom to create languages and words, thoughts. We can communicate our thoughts via language. And there was also a section on etymology of words. So I was an older student at this time. I was 30 years old and started to this new world of linguistics opened up to me, and I was just filled with this evangelical zeal for everyone to know about words and their origins.
Oh, great.
And so I came up with a plan that I would start a radio series about words and word histories, the origins of the many, many idioms we have in our language, and share my love of dictionaries over the radio. It so happens that my college, Montana State University in Bozeman, has a college-run radio station. It's one of the few free-form radio stations left in the nation.
Isn't that nice?
Yes, it is nice. And it's run by students at MSU as well as community volunteers and a very small paid staff.
Yeah.
And I gathered up my courage because I had no radio experience at all. I went into the general manager of KGLT. I proposed this idea to him that I wanted to start a radio series about linguistics and dictionaries and word histories. And this is what he looked like. For about 15
Oh,
seconds, he just kind of gave me this blank stare. And then
pause.
he said, "Sure, why not?"
Now, how long
So
ago was that? That
that
was
was in 1990.
1990. So,
Mhm. So it's
and you've
30.
been on the air ever since.
That's correct. Yes.
So, do people
So
write in and request etymology of words, or do you procure them yourself? I'm sure most often. But
right,
did
right.
you ever get some strange requests for where did this come from? Do
Oh
people write in?
yeah, I get requests all the time, which totally delights me. I love it when people are curious enough to ask, where did this particular phrase come? Raining cats and dogs. What the heck is up with that expression?
What is the heck with
Or-
what is that one? Where's
Raining cats and dogs.
yes,
One of those classic English language idioms that makes no sense literally. I feel sorry for anyone who's trying to learn English
English.
as a second language, for that reason.
Sure.
But most people think that raining cats and dogs, if it's raining heavily, there's a deluge, it sounds like the fighting of many cats and dogs. So it's kind of a sonic reference to the
Got it.
sound of a
Yeah.
rainstorm.
Before
Although
we
there are
jump
other
ahead,
theories as well.
before we jump ahead to something else, what does Montana mean?
It means mountainous. I finally found it
Okay,
out.
I just say,
I
wait a
finally
minute.
satisfied myself.
Okay, and everyone else, our listeners are at the edge of their seats, sipping their coffee this morning, saying, "Wait a minute, come back around." So it means mountainous
Yes, from the Spanish.
from the Spanish.
Yep.
Very cool. So, you know, going from language to language, it's interesting how things do get lost in translation, as you're saying, like people who are trying to learn English from another language. There are lots of words or some really important words that aren't found in the English language, right?
Right.
Uh, like, for example, oh, for me, I'll say, for example, the one that baffles me with just the little bit of Farsi translating from Arabic and Farsi and all of those Persian
Right.
culture words, we don't have a word that means both male and female at the same time.
Oh.
So when things always came translated through religious sects as he,
Right. That's
but
right.
in the original text, they were saying a word that means he and she and
Right.
they now. And
Yes. Yes.
so, what other words like that are fascinating, or would you like to share your soul calling? Tell me about that word.
Soul calling, I think, has to do with the term vocation.
Okay.
Vocation is a Latin term. It comes from the verb vocare, meaning to call. So one's vocation is literally one's calling. You hear a voice, you answer or you don't. Vocation is also related to vocative, voice,
Mm,
um, evocative, all those VOC words that
yeah.
refer to the sound of a voice. And
Fascinating.
so back to your original question about other languages that have terms that we don't,
Mhm,
one that I can think of right away is déjà vu, which
mhm.
is French, and it means already seen. We all know what the experience of déjà vu is, but there is no English word that equates to déjà vu. So we had to adopt that French term to describe that feeling of having been there before. One expression that I just have studied and actually was in the radio studio yesterday recording is beyond the pale.
Okay.
Beyond the pale, which means outside the bounds of decency or what is commonly expected. And this one might be a little tricky for people because we have three different words pale in the English language. One is PAIL. The other one is PALE, that means to be pallid or white.
Mhm.
And the other pale in beyond the pale is also spelled PALE, but it's an old and obsolete English word that means wooden stake.
Oh.
And in older English, the word pale was used to describe a fence or a boundary made of many wooden stakes that
Mhm.
surrounded a settlement of some kind.
Uh-huh.
And this was in older Older English or Old England. So many settlements or townships, if you will, were surrounded by a pale, P-A-L-E.
Got it.
Anything that was outside of that jurisdiction was considered rude or uncivilized or even dangerous. So if you went beyond the pale, that meant that you were doing something that was unacceptable or even frightening to the people who were inside the pale.
So is that what, if you're impaled by something?
That's
Would that
right.
be
Yes.
this?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Good connection. Yes. To be impaled is to have a wooden stake driven through your body.
Dracula or
Yeah.
something. Right? We're accidentally trying to get onto the other side of beyond the pale.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
impaled and
Yes.
trying to get beyond the interesting.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So I could see archaeology. It is similar to
It is.
archaeological digs. You're digging through language,
Right. Right.
you know, the cultures and how things shift and change in the
Looking
cultures.
for, that's right. Looking for signs of meaning.
What are some of
And
your favorite words? I'm just throwing things at you here
okay.
as they're popping into my brain, but like what are some of your favorite words that are kind of like onomatopoeia words where
Oh,
or
oh,
phrases that actually sound like they are or something like that?
onomatopoeias. There are so many of them. Oh, well, I'll tell you a little anecdote about
Okay.
my dad, who was also a language lover in his way. He loved onomatopoeias, words that make their own sounds, and he made up a whole lot of them in his lifetime and really delighted me as a kid. And one of my favorite onomatopoeias that he sort of coined was, we always had dogs around in the house when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And when the dogs would walk across a hard surface, their toenails would make a sound, tick, 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 you know, that sound.
Yeah.
And my dad said that it sounded to him like they were pickling across the floor, pickle, 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 pickle. And so that when he told me that, I was 5 years old, and it just made me laugh. And from that moment on, we called dogs' toenails pickles because they made that sound as they went across the floor.
That's so fun. 'Cause
Yeah. So
that's exactly what it sounds. Well, now that we're on pickle, if you get yourself in a pickle.
yes, yes,
What's
that's a
a good
good
way?
one. A very good idiom. It refers to the brine that people use to pickle cucumbers with. So, which is often vinegary and spicy. So if you get yourself into brine, into the pickle, it stings a lot. You're in a world
Oh,
of hurt. So
okay.
when you're in a pickle, you are stinging with shame or with, you know, anticipation or whatever it might be. Yeah, that's one I did actually for the Chrysti Wordsmith radio series, to be in a pickle.
To be in a pickle. Yeah, I was like,
Yeah,
that's a good
that's
one.
good. And
Um,
then you asked me about one of my favorite words.
yeah.
I don't really have a favorite word. Usually the word that I've been most recently researching is I call my favorite, but there is one word that kind of mystifies me. It's pulchritude, Pulchritude, pulchritude. It's Latin and it means beautiful. And I find it very ironic because pulchritude is probably one of the ugliest sounding words I've
Sounding
ever heard.
words.
But it means to be physically attractive or beautiful, to have beauty, pulchritude, pulchritudinous.
Pulchritudinous. Where does it come from?
It comes from Latin, from Pulch, which is the root, which means beauty.
Here. Wow. Okay. How about got you over a barrel? Where'd that come from?
Right. Well, to define one cliche with another, it's to be in a pickle, right?
Right.
In a
Right.
way, to be over a barrel is to be in a perilous situation. You are under someone else's control, usually. And this is an expression that comes from 19th century English, and it refers to a drowning victim, somebody who has
Oh,
been in the water for a long time, who is plucked out and is literally laid over a barrel, stomach first,
wow.
and then rolled back and forth until all the water is ejected from the lungs or the belly. So when you're over a barrel, you're nearly dead, literally.
Do you have another word you'd like to share with us? One more before we.
Yes, it's a word that I have recently been studying, a word that was completely new to me. And I just love it when those spontaneous words erupt into my field of vision. And the word is hygiene, which is the
Oh,
science of healthy living, basically.
mhm.
And every culture has its own sense of hygiene. But hygiene came from the name of a Greek goddess whose name was Hygeia, who was the personification of good health. And she was called upon originally in the original Hippocratic Oath for physicians to draw upon her power to so that they could operate properly and correctly and with precision on their patients. So Hygeia
Good.
is the name of a
I-
Greek goddess, the personification of good health.
So
People of our generation and past generations are going to encounter words in the dictionaries that they will just absolutely send them, gnashing their teeth in
fascinating.
dismay. It's just going to happen. It's how language changes. And language never stays still. It's always evolving. And this is how it's evolving in the word irregardless.
So I appreciate the evolutionary cycle of life and communication and the joy in it. Going with the flow is certainly an important piece of life and
Yeah.
literature. Welcome once again, and thank you for joining us, Chrysti Smith, Chrysti the Wordsmith. And we'll see her again sometime soon on a Soul Call Sunday. So join us. And thank you for joining us this morning for Wake Up with the Consciousness Cafe. And remember, wherever you are on the planet, you are loved. Peace and blessings.